episode 2 of Tales from a Humidor. Johnny has me say these stupid names and we put this stuff out there. And I just want it to be impromptu, and I just grab a guest that just happens to walk in. And today, one of my favorite reps, Adrian, from how many different brands, stopped in to see me. We carry a bunch of his brands. I'll let him tell you what they are.
How's it going, guys? So my name is Adrian. I am the representative in the Northeast of Gran Habano, Aladino, Quesada, Lampert, and Artesanos del Tabaco, which is the combination of Viva la Vida and El Pulpo. I absolutely adore those 5 brands. You see them in a lot of shops, and this is definitely one of my favorite destinations here when I'm in South Jersey. And just happened to be here today, and then we're doing this episode. Yep.
And I threw the camera in front of him, and we're just gonna talk a little cigars. Last week I had Michael Atkins on, the executive director of Atlantic City Arts Foundation. It was a great impromptu show, and Adrian, I always love hearing him talk, and he loves to hear himself talk too. So we're gonna actually talk about maybe a little cigar history.
Absolutely.
How you got in the cigar industry, where you're from, what you do, and do a little selfless plug on the brands at Tennessee Avenue Tobacco Company, and we'll go from there. Adrian?
Yep. So I started in the industry when I was living in Miami. So I was born and raised in Cuba. Came to Miami when I was a teenager, and soon started working part-time at cigar shops. That's kind of how I started in the industry. Very very much on a per diem basis. Hey, cover shift there, cover shift over there. Went on to become a history professor, and then somewhere along the line I found myself spending more time working in the cigar industry until eventually a few years ago retired as a teacher, went full-time in the industry. Most of the time I spent it on retail. About a year and a half ago I decided to open up my own brokerage firm. So then I am an independent broker right now. That's why I can work with 5 different brands. So my job is to represent these brands, to elevate them, to educate the consumer, as well as the shops, and I cover pretty much New York City all the way to the DC area.
So we're going to be a little impromptu. You mentioned you're from Cuba.
Yes.
What's your thoughts on Cuban cigars?
Trash. Absolute
trash.
Absolute
you hear
trash.
that?
Yeah.
Trash. Why are they trash?
Every industry in my country was pretty much destroyed once the country shifted from a capitalist model of producing whatever product it was all the way to now the government own the product. Part of the problem started when Fidel Castro nationalized the tobacco industry and expelled the top families that were doing this for generations. We talk about the Plasencias, the Olivas, the Quesadas, the Iroas, the Padrones, and after he did all of that and the product was nationalized, quality started declining massively. But Cuban cigars still remain somewhat decent up until the 1990s. A little bit of history, 1990s we go into a massive recession because of the collapse of the Soviet Union. So then Cuba has no other choice but to basically try to sell whatever it is that they can. And they open up the Cuban cigar industry to the international world. So now they do not have the infrastructure, they are not doing things properly, and now they're supposed to provide cigars for the entire planet. And when that happened, the quality started declining even more. It reached its all-time worst probably around 2020, 21. That's when China got in and bought the product. So now it's a disaster. They don't properly ferment the tobacco. They don't properly age the tobacco. They don't use the systems that we use in Honduras, Nicaragua, and the Dominican Republic to test the draw. There's no quality control whatsoever. So when you're smoking a Cuban, you have no idea what you're smoking. It could have been rolled by a 19-year-old that started rolling cigars a few years before that. It's not checked by anybody. The tobacco, it might be green, it might be under-fermented. It's just overall you are paying a lot of money for the most inconsistent tobacco product right now in the world.
So it's really forbidden fruit, and everybody in America wants that forbidden fruit, and they want to say, hey, I'm smoking a Cuban.
Yes.
But quality-wise, you would say...
The worst.
Where do you feel the best cigars are produced now?
I will say a combination of Nicaragua, Dominican Republic, and Honduras. With Costa Rica on the rise. Costa Rica's on a massive rise right now. Some of the product coming out of some really good factories in Costa Rica is really making some headlines. But the 3 countries that still dominate the industry are Nicaragua, Honduras, and the Dominican Republic. However, we cannot forget about some of the phenomenal wrappers that are coming out of Mexico, with the Mexican San Andres, and Ecuador produces some really good wrappers as well. So, but the bulk, that's pretty much the bulk of the cigar industry. I know that there's a lot of stuff coming out of Indonesia and the Philippines, but they haven't quite made it to the American market yet. So we don't really have a way of comparison with the more established products, primarily out of Honduras, Nicaragua, and the Dominican Republic.
So there you have it, folks. You come in, you ask for Cuban cigars. Not just this shop, pretty much any shop.
Don't
you
ask
always
for them.
hear,
Yeah.
you got Cubans, you got Cubans, you got Cubans. You heard it from a Cuban. They're not what you think they are.
No, not even close. And the reality is that most of the brands that we sell in the North American market are owned by Cuban families. They use the same techniques that we use in Cuba prior to the revolution. Many of them have Cuban seed. So in many ways you are smoking Cuban cigars when you're smoking a Plasencia, an Oliva, a Quesada. Sure, the tobacco is grown in different countries, and you know, some of the processes have changed a little bit, but in essence it's some of the similar product that the Cubans were smoking prior to the revolution.
So it's kind of like, I'll say, for lack of a better term, the car industry. That, okay, you have respect for Henry Ford of building the Ford coming out with the car, but other places have perfected it. Is it along the same lines where you have respect to Cuba for developing, being the grandfather?
Yes. So one of the confusions is a lot of people think, well, the cigar industry, for lack of better words, was created in Cuba in the 1820s, so therefore they need to be the best out of everything. The way that I would tell them is like, absolutely not. They're Americans, there's people all over the world that make great cigars. There's some of my favorite master blenders are not Cuban. Yes, you give credit where credit is due. The Cubans pretty much laid out the foundation, and to this day the Cubans are still very involved in the cigar industry. You look at some of the top brands in any humidor, Perdomo, you know, Nick Perdomo is Cuban heritage, AJ Fernandez born in Cuba, Pepin Garcia, Manolo Quesada, Julio Eiroa. I mean, there's all individuals born and raised in Cuba that started in Cuba, and some of them, their children have followed, and their grandchildren have followed in that trajectory. So you give credit where credit is due, but that illusion, that enigma, that somewhat because it's grown in Cuba is superior, not even close. It's actually quite a joke at this point.
Okay, so I'm going to throw one out there for you. You get put on a deserted island.
Yes.
And you can only bring one cigar brand with you, and you're going to be there for an indefinite amount of time. What's the cigar you're going to bring?
It's tough. It's very tough.
And I know it's tough for you because you represent.
But on a personal basis, I've always had an affinity for Padron. I adore the family and the product that they produce. And for a very long time, my favorite cigar was the Padron Family Reserve 46 Maduro. Now I don't smoke it often. It's almost like, you know, you don't. I have my top restaurants. I try not to go often because I don't want to become jaded. And if I smoke it every day, but it's very difficult for me to say I would only smoke this brand. I think there are brands out there that produce phenomenal product and are coming up with innovations and limited stuff and playing with different tobacco around the world that makes you get excited even for a brand that perhaps 5 years ago you were not smoking. So it's also tough for me because I smoke everything. When I visit a shop, a lot of times I walk around the humidor, I'm like, what haven't I tried from this humidor? Regardless whether I represent the brand or I like the company, I always try to, you know, smoke different cigars. Like one of the first times I came here, you gave me a Didier and I fell in love with it, and I wasn't very familiar with it. So I always try to look for those cigars, and I always recommend that to consumers, like expand your horizons, try different stuff. You'll quickly realize that there's a lot of really good stuff out there. We are in one of the peaks of cigar consumption because of that, because we have so many different companies that are producing phenomenal sticks. Yep.
So we're going to keep this short today, but I definitely want to bring Adrian back. I love his passion. One thing I always love about Adrian is his passion for cigars and his knowledge of the history, the culture, everything that goes into cigars. And you know, thanks for tuning in. This is going to be a short episode today. We're going to have Adrian back when we can sit and really smoke a bunch of different cigars and spend the time going over some different brands. But real quick, give a plug to the brands you represent.
Yes, so in the Northeast Territory, I work with Gran Habano, I work with Aladino, Quesada, Lampert, and Artesanos del Tabaco, which is Viva la Vida, and El Pulpo. For those of you guys who are not familiar with it, last year El Pulpo was number 10 cigar of the year by Cigar Aficionado. Quesada is one of the oldest and most established companies out of the Dominican Republic, making a big comeback with Oktoberfest and Casa Magna. Gran Habanos on a massive rise as well. We're actually smoking Gran Habanos right now. We're smoking the Black Dahlia, which is a Corojo, one of my all-time favorites. Aladino, I mean, the Eiroa family are pretty much the founders of the Honduran cigar industry. Very famous back in the days with brands like Camacho, Baccarat. Well, now they have Aladino. And yeah, this I'm very blessed as a broker that I have 5 phenomenal companies. Lampert, a bit of an unknown company, but it's taking over the Northeast by storm. So yeah, if you know, go into shops, ask the tobacconist, ask for recommendations, smoke a little bit of everything. Honestly, yeah.
So we'll see you next week. Gonna have John, our producer, put this together, and take care.
Bye guys.